Okay. I'm going to switch to speaker view. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone for coming, tuning in. We've got Mr. Benjamin Von Wong here, and I'll give him a little quick intro if you don't know who he is or you don't know about him. Me and Ben have we knew of each other's work for a while, I think, and then we finally met after a couple of years in Perth, and we immediately started climbing rooftops and jumping over each other, and it was it was a very high energy meeting, but it was great. I think we worked out we're on the same page. Yeah, I've always admired Ben's work because it's so larger than life and has these. It's always just so epic. You always wonder like how did he pull that off, and it usually involves tons of planning, a lot of people, a lot of hours, and it's very much a quality over quantity kind of approach that Ben has. He might only do like one shoot a month, but it would be like the most epic shoot ever. And lately he's been, I guess over the past few years, Ben's been concentrating a lot. You can probably talk about it better, but he's moved his focus to the impact space and environmental activism and that kind of thing, which is very admirable. And he seems to be making a lot of impact there. So that's Ben. We've got some audio from someone else. I'm going to try and mute it. Cool. So that's Ben. Ben, do you want to intro yourself and just tell everyone what you do?
Yeah, I think that summarized it really well. I think back when I met Jared, by the way, my girlfriend's a huge fan of Jared, so I think that's one of the things that sustained the friendship. I love Jared too, obviously. Great sense of humor, good energy, and that's something definitely that we bonded upon. But when we first met, I think at the time I was trying to transition away from big, epic, large projects to impact-based projects. And so my background, if I just rewind really quickly, is in hard rock mining engineering. I quit my day job in 2012 and started traveling around. I realized that photography was a great way to travel for free or at cost. If I could just travel and teach and travel and teach, and then as I taught, I'd get a free flight somewhere or comped out flight and then just kind of move around from there. So it'd be this sort of cycle that I could sustain. And then the project just got bigger and bigger and bigger until eventually one day I had a couple projects go viral, and then I started doing some really large scale commercial work. Over the course of a few, I suppose, months of doing that, which was really like the top of the food chain for me. Long story short, I got a campaign that paid me more than my entire career combined. And it just showed sort of like what the scale of projects could be if you reached kind of the top tier of marketing. But it just felt somewhat unfulfilling. It didn't feel like there was anywhere to go after that. And so that's when I started questioning a lot of existential, like, why am I doing? What am I doing? How long am I going to do it for? Like, where do I go from here? And so that's where I almost quit photography and wanted to transition more into documentary filmmaking, because I thought that's where I could do more impactful work. And then I did a couple projects there and realized, like, you know what, documentaries are fun, but ultimately asking for help all the time and being surrounded by people that are struggling is just not really necessarily that exciting. So then I repivoted back. So this is around 2016. To try to figure out how to fuse like this larger than life fantasy project that I was doing with impact. And so that was a complex journey. It took me about 18 months before I got my first paid job as I transitioned through the phases. Over the times, algorithms change, as you guys all know. It became harder and harder to make things go viral. The value of like large complex photography projects, I think has sort of trended down. It's not impossible, but it's just trending down. And I just started to see sort of that even if I could get paid for now to do big epic projects, that it was going to run out sooner or later. And so I started wondering what the next step was. And so over the last, I think, 2 years has been a slow transition into the experiential space, doing installations. It felt like a wonderful idea before coronavirus because everyone starts to pay for experiences. Everyone's paying for, you know, something that they can participate in, something interactive. And that just felt like a really great way to open source my work. So if I was really good at building crazy worlds, now I could open source these crazy worlds to everyone who cared about the same issue, and they could take photographs of their own. And yeah, so I think the challenges. Well, do you want to interrupt, Jared, or should I just keep talking? Because I can monologue, but I didn't know if you wanted to do a Q&A or
No,
if
I
you wanted
think
me
I
to
think it's keep going. You're probably heading
open.
the same way that we're going.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think the things that I've been struggling a little bit with, for the most part, some internal struggles. When you're in the impact space, you want to make a difference, and you ultimately come to the conclusion that at the end of the day, you're just one person, and no matter how successful the art you create is or how big of a name you make, you're still just going to be one person. So there's just been this quest to figure out, well, how do you empower more people to do the work that they find meaningful? How do you enable them to integrate more purpose and impact into their careers, regardless of where they're at? So that was like one existential question. And then the big second existential question is like, as I've added more layers onto my projects, so I will produce a project, right? I'll meet the nonprofits or the organizations, talk to them, learn about what they're doing. I'm doing a lot of research and development. I'll build a team. I'll build a concept. I'll design like different prototypes, and then I'll go there, assemble the team, create the thing, and then make a video, and then assemble a website, create a press kit, and then launch the whole thing. And then now we're trying to measure the impact over time of the project that was created and share the lessons that were done. It's like, okay, there's like a lot of layers on this thing right now, like that little pie. So Jared's actually really generous to say that I do one shoot a month. It's kind of slowed down to like one every like 6 months at this stage. And I'm like, none of this really scales very well. So that's kind of been my struggle, is that as I've gotten deeper into the impact hole, and as let's call it the legend of Von Wong, of the brand of what's possible, has grown, so have the expectations. But I'm still just one person currently living in my parents' house on lockdown. So so those are kind of the two big struggles. Like, how do you scale? Where do you go from there? And like, how do you actually inspire and move more people into the direction that you want to go? So yeah, one of the questions that I get all the time, I'm just gonna like address it right away, is like, what's the business model? How do you even survive? So I have like 3 income streams, all of which have disappeared. The first one is like corporate speaking. So unlike when you speak at a photography conference, which if you're lucky, you get paid. And if you get paid, you might cap out somewhere around the realm of $1,000. Corporate speaking circuits are actually really lucrative. When I first got signed up to a speaking bureau, they were paying about $5,000 a talk. And I just booked my first 10K a talk piece. It's just 45 minutes, go talk to a bunch of rich people in some conference room, fly across the world, talk to them. And so that's been like one avenue stream. It's completely disappeared, obviously. I don't even know if I'm going to get the 10K thing. The second thing that I started doing was consulting. So I figured that it's a lot. One of the things that slows down the process a lot is like it takes a lot of time to execute a project, but if you're just participating in design as a consultant, you can get work. And one of my mentors shared a really great piece of insight, which is that artists only get paid to execute things, right? You don't get paid to think. That's why artists are always pitching ideas over and over, and you have to like put all this work up front and then sell the idea. And if it doesn't go through for whatever reason in the entire pitching process, because the person you're talking to like changed jobs, or because their strategy changed, or because funding's changed, or because someone just doesn't like the way you look, like whatever the reason is in that journey, you've just lost all that time. It doesn't matter how big the product is, that's like the same pattern that repeats over and over. But consultants, on the other hand, get paid to think. Like, they don't actually need to do anything. They just need to think and provide insights and provide connections and ideas and directions. And so I thought, like, why not take my entire work process and break it into 2 halves? Do some consulting, help people like design things. So that means that the next time someone came up to me and said like, hey, I love your work, can we work together? instead of saying like, sure, let's hop on a call, let's talk, and I'll say something along the lines of like, tell me more about what you're working on. I'd love to see whether or not there's a way that it can help you. I like to run all my clients through a design thinking workshop, and together I'm sure we can work something out. And then over the course of, it's approximately a 1 month process. And together we can develop some ideas together, right? So it's like, I'm inviting them into something, and I'm offering them sort of measurable things. So there's that design and consulting thing, which was going well, not anymore, because there's nothing to design and consult on. And then the final and third piece of the puzzle was just the normal projects that I would be putting together, whether it was pro bono, at cost, or for profit, like whichever direction. So that's kind of how I managed to survive despite doing so few projects every single year.
Yeah, I think that's like a real interesting way to approach a business model, which I guess, yeah, it works out for a lot of people. Like become an expert and become so known for one specific thing that you get work as corporate speaking and as consulting. And I know a few people that like my friend who I'm inviting on to do this as well. She's a ultra marathon runner. So through that, you wouldn't expect that to net a great income. She is like one of the world's best. So she gets sponsorship through that. But because of her experience and all the adversity that she overcomes through the running, she actually, I believe, I'm not sure, makes the majority of her income through corporate speaking because she has so much to tell. So that's really interesting. And I like what you said about the expectations getting higher with what you do. And that's something that is across the board with all of the successful creative people that I talk to. When we talk about the stress and the challenges of what they do now, everybody says it's easy enough to set the bar and to do crazy things and to make a name for yourself, but the struggle is maintaining it, and that brings like way more stress.
Well, I think part of the struggle is that, and I'm not sure if you have the same experience, but that you can become an expert at something, but the expertise that you have expires over time. And so there's this sort of like illusion where like, okay, great, you can learn photography, and the physics of how a camera works will not change. The physics of like lighting will never change. So you can become an expert at capturing a good image, right? By just putting in your 10,000 hours, because the rule of law doesn't change. But you can never become an expert influencer, because the platform and the world and the ecosystem under which your skill set exists is constantly shifting under your feet. And you don't control that part. Actually, nobody controls that. And so you can be extremely good at what you do, but unless you keep it up and maintain it, it's going to expire. And you can develop a series of best practices. Like some things do stay true, like the power of a good narrative is true regardless of which platform you choose to. But like, if the platform you're an expert on gets upended by another platform, it doesn't matter how great you are, you're going to have to kind of like reset, right? And so there's this sort of like, there's a different kind of pressure. So instead of actually getting better at what you do, when you pursue this idea of like, I think, trying to keep up with the platforms, what you end up doing is you expend like all this creative energy that you could be spending becoming a better artist at just like readapting and readapting and readapting. And that was just something that I personally got really, really tired of. So I totally missed the Snapchat wave. I've missed so many waves. And like, I mean, I think you went through the same thing, right? I have 300,000 followers on Facebook and I don't know what to do with them. I think like I posted 2 days ago because I saw something on Board Panda that I thought was cool. But I think that like I hadn't posted there for 4 months and I don't even know what to say anymore on my Facebook. And I'm like, oh, well, whatever. No one's going to see it anyways. And it's just this like weird thing. So something I had spent so much time, energy, and effort developing, like I have videos on my Facebook account like that total over 100 million views. And I have this like asset and it's just sitting there because like it was actually, if I wanted to sell product, I could just like pump ads through it. I have a targeted audience. Like that's what it was designed for, but it's not what I'm interested in it for. So there's something really important there to remember.
Yeah, I'm faced with the exact same thing. I think just to the T. Got a couple 100,000 on Facebook. That was very exciting and such a great asset. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And over the years, algorithms change. There's more content everywhere. Everything just seems like it doesn't get seen anymore, and you start feeling like, what's the point of putting it out there if only 100 people were like out of 200,000?
So,
I might as well just
now
do
you have
nothing.
to start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, no. Now you have to start TikTok, because TikTok's the new rage, and it's got a great algorithm, and it's like a good way of storytelling. And it's like, you can just keep chasing this. Like, you're never going to win.
So what have you done to like combat this?
For me specifically, it's just going deeper rather than going volumetrically larger, if that makes sense. I think you could try to compete by scaling up your team, like creating an agency and then running that, but then you just have more to lose when things go bad, like right now.
That's
doing digital advertising was an amazing time to be. That was an amazing time. You'll rock it. If you're in experiential marketing, you're like, holy shit, what did I just do? I don't know. Like, it's odd because, so the one thing that you'll have and that you'll always carry with you is the story of who you are and what you've done, right? So like, if you, Jared, wanted to move into corporate speaking, you would have a lot of things to talk about because you put yourself in really interesting scenarios that had nothing to do with your name and your brand. Like this project that you're sending postcards in, or going on Survivor, or like, like you are constantly finding different ways to put yourself in unique situations that have not necessarily anything to do with your brand, but along the way, you're collecting experiences, you're collecting stories. And these stories never expire. They can be rehashed infinitely over and over again. So I really like this idea of workshops and teaching, because so long as you can adapt it to the times, it becomes timeless. I think networking is really, really key. Try to get in the room with people who, like, try to be the weirdest person in the room. Like, I don't need to be the best artist. I just need to be the only artist in the room, and then I'll be the best one. So I kind of always try to end up in really weird situations that I shouldn't be in, and try to meet people who instantly recognize that what I do is kind of cool. And then I just try to make friends. And then it's really weird because you can't, when you do like larger scale projects, like my projects, for me to make money, they have to be like 6-figure projects. I never know when I'm going to meet that actual right person that's going to make that happen. But I just kind of go around and I talk to people. And then like 5 years down the line and something comes through and you're like, oh, it was because of that thing. That was that thing. And you just kind of like backtrack it. So I think networking, and thinking of like really how you're crafting that story, to look at the long game, to not just focus on like, if someone's already doing it and doing it really, really well, you're probably already a little bit late to the game. Do something that like that really resonates with you. So I guess I can just talk about, I'll do a little bit of self-promotion on what I'm working on right now, but more importantly on the why. I was talking to one of my friends who's been nomadic for 5 years. She's not nomadic right now. I think she's stuck in someone's home. And I asked her, I was like, how do you decide what to do with your week, what to do with your time? Like, how do you even decide what to prioritize when there is no structure around you, right? You have no schedule, you have no constraints. And she said that she does 2 things. The first thing she does is think about how she wants to spend her time in an ideal week, right? Like, how many hours are you putting into X activity, Y activity, Z activity? You're probably putting way more hours into emailing than you actually want to, right? So like, design what the ideal week should look like. And then you can combine that with sort of this chart of Ikigai, which is the intersection of purpose. So what you can get paid for, what the world needs, what you're good at, and what you love. So what you're good at, what you can get paid for, what the world needs, and what you love. You can just Google it. There's these beautiful Venn diagrams. And if you can have the compass of Ikigai to point you in a direction, and you can have the way you would like to spend your time, you can actually paint a fairly interesting direction or map of where you could go towards. And when I did that exercise for myself, I realized that what I actually really love doing more than anything else is just have deep conversations with people who are smarter than me doing work that I respect, right? And but there's no way that fits into my social strategy. There's no way that fits into like my business model or my influencer kind of status. Like my fans don't really care about that. And I was just like, okay, how can I integrate that? So I was going to be nomadic this year. I'm not, I'm back at my parents. Um, and the idea was like, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and like spend all my time while traveling to like meet interesting, unique people. And then I started having these conversations to explore the intersection of art and impact. And then I found myself trying to explain to people that I knew would be interested in the content what I had learned, which led to, why don't I just record these into like an interesting podcast? Like people love podcasting when they're commuting, except now no one has a commute. So I've decided to start a podcast in the worst time possible to start a podcast, which I think is actually a blessing because now everyone has time to participate in my podcasts. And by the time people start listening to them again, my podcast will actually be half decent. So, so this is just kind of an example of something that right now is like losing money. It's costing me a ton of time. I'm learning a whole different medium. I don't have like what I'm good at, which is visuals. I don't have that to lean on as a crutch. So I'm starting off as a complete newbie. But it's fun. It's been so much fun. And I can't remember the last time I created something just because I really enjoyed the process of creating it, right? Because there's like process and then there's output, right? Normally we're focused on the output. I'm going to create a photo a day, every day. I'm going to create a story. This is the output I'm going to deliver, and I'm going to be rewarded for that. And I've just been really enjoying the process of creating, even though like I don't really know what I'm doing. It's frustrating. I have to learn all the way. I'm like editing ums out, all this stuff. It's really difficult, but the process is still fun. And so I probably had my most unsuccessful launch in my entire career on Monday when I launched this podcast. It was half intentional. I was like, there's no point like broadcasting it to the world. It's just one episode. But my thing on Instagram has 400 likes. I think it's like my worst performing post of all times because it's so different from what I normally like output. Algorithms don't like change. But it's okay because I am learning something in the process of it. So the output of like how many views it gets right now is not the important metric. So that doesn't matter. It's all the rest that's going into it. So I'm really liking that piece. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah. And I think you know more than most about how about my unsuccessful podcast venture so far has gone, because I think you've described it in a great way. Because for me, the process has been really fun. I've been recording conversations with amazing creative people around the world, including Ben, maybe 2 years ago or 3. The process has been fun, but like you described, there's good things and bad things about being a complete noob at something, especially when you're known for being great at something else. So I've enjoyed the process. It's been fun learning and just discovering this new thing, but the output is not exactly where I had hoped it to be, in terms of, how I'm speaking or the flow of the conversation. It's obviously got better over time, but especially at the beginning, I was like, that was really fun to do, but I'm not sure about putting it out because I'm used to getting a lot of praise for my photos, and because they are nice and pretty to look at. And then now I'm suddenly saying, hey, everybody, look at this other thing I'm doing. It's not that good, but come support me. It's been weird for me to like reconcile. So that's partly the reason why I have not published 3 years worth of podcasts.
No way.
Yeah. And I think
I looked at it a different way. So I actually feel really lonely in my community. So I used to identify as a photographer and I was part of the photography community and go to the photography conventions and hang out with the other photographers. And then as I started getting more interested in this whole impact side of things, I realized that the community in which I had become known didn't actually care for what I was working on. Like they didn't care about the whole backstory and the impact and the strategy and so forth. So for me, part of this is actually to build a new community. Not that I want to leave the guys behind. I still want to keep doing what I do, but I'm kind of tired of being a prisoner of my own audience. Um,
Mm.
and I felt this way on Instagram. So like, if I post about my work and it's really big and glamorous, I get a lot of likes. And if I don't, then I don't. And it's like, and so then I don't end up posting. It's just like, well, then what do I have this thing for? It's like golden handcuffs. It's weird.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists feel the same way. We're trapped by the algorithms, which is, I think, what everybody hopefully right now is reflecting on and shifting on and using this time where no one can go out and create new work, or they're severely limited in the way. So now's a time when it's time to reflect and pivot your business and work out new streams and new ways of doing things and work out what the purpose of it all is. And now's a great time because the FOMO especially has gone. You're not looking at other people and seeing, wow, look at all this amazing stuff everyone's doing right now. I better do the same. Nobody's doing that stuff. So that that feeling of missing out is gone. And I found that like super refreshing.
Yeah, and I think there's also one other piece to it. Like, I mean, so as a result of doing these Zoom calls for you, I'm actually curious to know your opinion on it. Like, isn't it so different to do a call like this that's an hour long, that's meant to be in depth and about connecting with someone and offering value, than doing like a really quick live that's spontaneous and on the spot? And like, it's a completely different thing. So you build different relationships as a result of like slowing down. Have you felt that?
Yeah, it's been really interesting and really cool. You know, we've organized daily Zooms for the past maybe 10 or 11 days, and there's been a consistent, different people drop in every day, but there's also a consistent group that has mostly come every day, and it's really fun getting to know people in this way and connecting in this way. And you're right, and that's why I wanted to try and push everybody to this Zoom thing, not on Instagram, not on social media. Try start a database of people that would be interested in connecting like this, because just like you were saying, most people on my Instagram would not really care about this kind of thing. They're there to see pretty photos, and that's cool.
And your sense of humor, which translates anywhere, is good.
Yeah, but you're right about being trapped by by all this stuff. So if something's not funny or something's not a beautiful photo, I don't feel like posting, and I'm not actually funny that often or creating beautiful photos. So I end up not posting for weeks and weeks because I'm like, it's not the right standard. And it didn't used to be like that. And so I think it's really important to think of different ways to communicate and get your message out there that aren't, like you said, that aren't reliant on the algorithms.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to ask, so what is there anything else that you've been doing in this downtime apart from the podcast? Has it shifted any projects that you were working on? Are you looking at new opportunities that have arisen specifically from this?
I had about like 250 grand of projects that disappeared. They're not money in the pocket. They were like production budgets and so forth, but they were big projects that I had worked, like basically set up my last year to get. So I was like, okay, but that's okay. I feel super privileged. I mean, I feel extremely privileged that I have a roof over my head, that I have electricity, I have internet. I'm not worried about getting kicked out. I have food, I have family close by. I just think that so many people don't have that luxury. And so with that privilege comes like an extreme sense of like helplessness, because I'm like, everything I do is useless right now. Like in the event of a zombie apocalypse of this style, like what the hell am I supposed to contribute to the world? Like, and so that's been a little bit of a struggle. Though I recently schemed up I'm in the process of designing, I think, one of those compilation videos that I think would be really cool. I'm calling it The Other Heroes. And I just think there are so many people that are going above and beyond to help in this crisis that are currently invisible, that aren't getting the attention because the people who would normally tell those stories are in lockdown. And so I'm thinking of doing this little crowdsource community project. I'm going to use my own little impact group that I started as a petri dish to see if I can launch it. So I'm in the process of designing the script, the Google Forms, the website, the domain, and going to use my network to reach out to nonprofits and so forth and see what I can get done. Collect the footage by mid next week and see what kind of thing I can launch. See if it could catalyze a movement. I think people feel helpless and isolated when they don't know what else to do, but if maybe they were exposed to a bunch of inspirational people actually doing something, they might feel it would simultaneously combat like anxiety, but also like empower people. So I'm especially looking for stories of creatives who are finding ways to help in these times. So if you guys know anyone, let me know. I'm thinking like, I don't know, entertainers that are screencasting into elderly homes, or like some random DJ in like the inner city, just like pumping tunes out of his rooftop or something, like just something funny like that. I don't know. So that's one of the things that I'm working on. I'm taking a community design class. I actually think you might find it fascinating, Jared. It's specifically around how do you design a community that is so valuable that people are willing to pay for it. And it's not a Patreon model. It's not like here's $5 a month support you. It's like $1,000 program and a gate guarded community that you would try to work on to design. I'm taking it not necessarily because I want to create that community right now, but I just find the principles really fascinating on like what gets someone coming back every day. How do you engage people? How do you deliver value to them when you're not necessarily the one creating the content, which is a very interesting format for someone who's used to like running on that hamster wheel. Yeah, and I'm doing this podcast. So the podcast is called Impact Everywhere, which means I need to find, or I'm looking for positive impact in unexpected places. So it's a lot of work, man. Like finding the person. I do like a 1-hour interview beforehand, take a bunch of notes, and then synthesize that down into, 4 bullet points that I then have to book the actual podcast and then record it and then edit it down and then prepare the art and then prepare the different formats. It's like, and then it's like 100 views. Yes, but it's okay. The long game.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm facing at the moment. I'm finally happy with what I'm recording for my podcast, but now it's all the other stuff, the music, the thumbnail, the working out which platforms to publish to, and it's now's the time though. I always say I don't have time, but
I'm using Buzzsprout. I'm using Buzzsprout, and it's free for the first 90 days, so I haven't paid $1 yet.
All right, looks like something I should get into. Hey, I wanted to ask this quick question. Because what I think in this crazy time, we're getting this shift in global consciousness. Everybody's changing the ways that they're thinking. I think people are experiencing what it's like to have a little bit of loss of freedom. People are taking less things for granted. Do you think all of this might actually have some benefit for the kind of projects you do in the impact space? Do you think people are going to be more receptive to the kind of messages you're sending out?
I mean, I think the purpose economy is one that has been growing and thriving for it's been on the rise for a very long time, regardless of COVID-19. I think that in general, there is a massive shift into companies that are more active in the things that they stand for rather than passive. I mean, the Patagonia model of kind of saying we are in the business to accomplish X is, I think, going to be something that'll start to trend globally. I mean, when you look at the way the dollars flow, you look at like investment, like fund managers that are managing like hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. And they're starting impact funds and ESGs and all these different global initiatives to make sure that certain industries are excluded from these investments. And I just think it's a matter of time. I mean, when I first started moving into the impact space, it was sort of this dumb move because it's like, haha, not only are you creative, now you're limiting who you can work for. Like, what a great way of not creating opportunity for yourself and setting yourself up for failure. But then there was this sort of like underlying idea that like the world is getting worse, especially when you look on the environmental or climate side of things. I think if you look on like polarization of wealth and certain other issues there, you can also see that those trends going in the other way. And so if you can get a head start on something you're passionate about and care about, and be one of the few voices that are able to represent it in a way that truly touches people, it's a really small market. And small markets are good because then you can charge a lot for them. So I think there's actually like good business sense to getting involved in the purpose market. Um, uh, in addition to like obviously like feeling good about yourself and so forth, but like you can just follow the dollars. You look at like alternative meat industries right now who are doing it for both animal rights, agriculture, and health. You look at movies like Game Changers, that I think that it's super popular in Australia. I think it has the highest per capita number of views um, out of any other place, and it's just like you watch these trends and like and the dollar value of certain companies go up and down and follow these trends, and then you can be like, oh, maybe there's a place there for me. And I think that's why it's so important to get out of like the silos in which we live. So like as storytellers, you have to be exposed to stories that you want to tell. If you're just a creative sitting with a bunch of creatives who are telling creative things for the sake of creating creative things, then it'll never expand beyond that. You need to like sort of find out what stories you want to tell and escape into those worlds so that you can then be the weirdest person in the room, synthesize something that they haven't seen because you're bringing a whole new perspective to it. And then you take those new experiences and you go to somewhere else. And then that cross pollination of things is where things get really exciting. So yeah, I don't know directly with COVID-19 how it's going to affect gatherings. I mean, humans have really short memories, especially when the threat isn't existential. I think we're going to be like, yeah, in a year, we're just going to be back to our good partying selves. For better or for worse, I think more for worse. But yeah.
Well, you're a very impressive and articulate human being, Ben. It's been great to talk to you. I want to open it up to anyone if they want to throw anything Ben's way before we let him go. I've seen in the chat that Michael says, I think it's very difficult sometimes to measure positive impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But you have
So that's actually,
you do have methods of measuring, some methods that you're using.
you have some. So the quantitative ones are the biggest ones. You can do qualitative surveys. But actually, this is the question that drove me to build the podcast is like, I wanted to talk to people who were experts in the field to figure out how they were measuring impact. And there are a couple of key lessons that I have learned that I'll share if no one has questions, which is it's really hard to measure impact if you're in an environment that isn't designed to be measured, right? But if you like, so there's this study that the guy on my first episode on my podcast said, and he's talking about this study that was done in a hospital. And so in a hospital, everything is measured. You measure the amount of time someone comes in, how long it takes for them to heal, how happy, how healthy they are, and how long it takes before they get out. And for every single day that a patient is inside of a hospital, it costs the hospital money. And so there's a cost incentive. And so they did these studies where they could measure the presence of art and how it impacted healing. And if you had a piece of art that was engaging and stimulating and interesting and exciting to the people that were there, you could cut their healing time by half. And so if you cut the healing time by half, now more people are going in and out of the hospital, so the cost increases, which means that you can now calculate the return on investment of how much you should put into a piece of art over a course of time, right? So measuring is part of the design process. You have to design it. The second thing that I learned from another conversation that I had with someone was like, when you design a project, if like you might not be able to measure all of the impact, but sometimes you just need to measure some of the impact. And so if you design a project with an outcome in mind, let's say a state change from A to B. So you're not trying to raise awareness for plastics because now you can't measure how much awareness you've really raised, but you say, I want to convince this grocery store downstairs to stop using plastic bags, and I'm going to create a campaign around that. And along the way, I'd like to raise awareness too. You can measure whether or not you've had an impact on that one single place, which can now affect the wider community, which can now affect the greater population, right? So there's just like a lot of like different insights like that I've been gleaning from just talking to other people that I think really point towards the fact that it's not that it's impossible to measure. It's possible. It just needs to be designed. If you don't design for it, it'll never be there. But if you design for it, you may just be able to find something that was never there prior. So, yeah.
We've got a couple questions in there, kind of the same thing, which is how do you determine what cause or what issues to focus on with your projects? Do you have something in mind and you look for the audience or the people to make that happen, or do you have things come to you?
So I'm an extrinsically inspired person, meaning I don't get inspired by being alone, locked in quarantine. I get inspired by like meeting. I get inspired. No, but I get inspired by meeting and talking to different people. So like, you know, and this is why it's so important for me to like dip my toes into other worlds, is that when I get to hear the struggles that someone else is having, then I can start thinking about like, how might story help change this narrative? And so like, it was a Zoom call on last Friday where I was talking to a bunch of nonprofits, and they were talking about how not only were they losing all their volunteers, they were losing their sources of funding. They've had to fire their own staff, and they're still having to try to serve, you know, their communities of homeless or migrants or undocumented or people who are abused with like a quarter of the resources. And it was just not possible. And they've gone from trying to improve people's lives to actually just try to keep them alive. And then it was through that conversation that I was like, you know what, I think maybe story could help, because if more people knew, maybe more help could come. And where are the storytellers right now? They're all locked in their rooms. So it's like, I need to have that conversation with someone to understand what their challenges are, to then maybe see how story could play a part. And then I can take all my experiences from maybe designing campaigns, my social following, and now I can actually take those and use them, because those are just tools to make something great happen. So I don't really choose the campaigns as much as the campaigns choose me. I think it's just really, what I really actively try to do is surround myself with people who are inspiring, people who are just doing things, who are living fully, who really believe in the mission of what they do, and then just try to help them. Try to help them however I can, and that's when you just like hear all this stuff, and then you get ideas from that, at least in my case.
Awesome, man. I think no more questions coming in. I think we'll let you go. I only told you it would be half an hour, so thanks for sticking around a bit longer.
Yeah, for sure, guys.
Super inspiring there, man. So just say one more time where people can what the podcast is called and where people can follow along if they want to come along the journey.
Oh, for sure. The podcast is called Impact Everywhere. I started a little micro community called Impact Everywhere on Facebook, which is what I'm going to try to develop. We'll see if it'll be a total failure. I hate Facebook groups. Von Wong is where you can find my work, I think. I don't know what I'm posting on there anymore. It's a little bit of a question. But yeah. But if you guys have any questions, just send me an email, shoot me a message. I'm super responsive. No one else runs my anything. I'm just one dude. So happy to help or brainstorm or play. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ben. Good luck in quarantine. Oh, hang on. I unmuted people, and now all the microphones are coming back.
Now we can see that no one was paying attention.
Man, enjoy quarantine. If you want to see some funny quarantine content, everyone, follow Ben and follow his mum's Instagram.
Workers necessarily, but at the same time,
hang on, I'm going to keep muting. Wait, I've muted Ben by accident. Whoops. Okay. You're back. All right, follow Ben, follow his Instagram. I'm enjoying following your new stories in quarantine.
My mom. You guys need to follow my mom.
and seeing what she'll deliver you each day for dinner. That's been the quarantine content that we all want.
Yeah, it's gotten the most engagement out of anything I've ever done. It's my
Really?
My mom's emails for me every day.
So okay. See you later, mate. Thank you very much for this.
Bye. Take care.
See you.